Once again, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining for another session of Azure Power Lunch. Um, we are recording this session and place our recordings on our YouTube channel. If you don't want to be recorded, you may want to drop off now. And with that, Hugo, floor is yours, man.
Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So today the subject would be Azure AI Foundry. So a little bit about me. So I'm Hugo Girard. I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft, and basically I help our customer to create cloud native application and obviously bring some AI through their app. So this is the agenda of today. So I will talk about what is Azure AI Foundry, the concept of hub and project, the model catalog. Obviously, the goal is to consume any kind of LLM, the SDK and the inference endpoint. And you will see when we go through demo that will make more sense. Although theory I will speak about will make more sense when we go to the coding part of the demo. And at the end, obviously, some Q&A. So before starting, this is kind of like a high level what developers are looking for when they start doing any kind of AI application. They want first like the right tool and model for their use case. There's so many models out here, so many tools you can use, like or SDK, LangChain, semantic kernel, prompt flow, name it. So that's the first question, and which model would make sense for the business case they want to do. After that, they want to switch easily through an AI and some coding. They want to test all their prompt engineering. So if you used to do anything Gen AI related, you will want to test the prompt maybe in a UI, test different model easily, and after that you will start basically coding your application. So they want a way to do this. An orchestration framework, when you have like complex stuff you need to do, you want to call maybe a Bing search to get more metadata to pass to the LLM, how you can do that. And even sometimes to do it without a writing line of code, like kind of a UI that will do that for you. The more you're going through your journey on AI development, you will want to find some app template, just kind of a starting base, like how you can connect all those services together. You want to evaluate all those different models. There's so much now. Yes, you have OpenAI, but you have more, like even Microsoft will develop other model. You have the one from Meta, so you want to test them, see some benchmarking. And after that, obviously, like you will want to monitor your application. Today, I mean, you can still do it, but you will see with AI Foundry, we get some new tool that make it easier, to understand what your app is doing and the performance and the bottleneck that you can face. So if you work with OpenAI in the past, you were having this thing called Azure AI Studio. So it kind of bit rebranded, and we bring all the AI services that we have on one platform. So here it's Azure AI Foundry. So basically, it's a unified platform to do all your AI development. That you want to do prompt flow, you want to test maybe document intelligence, you will have like one single pane of glass to do everything. Spin some VM that you want to run some Python code and so on. So basically, at the end of the day, like moving forward, we see our customer, they start using Azure AI Foundry at the central point for everything that is AI development, speech to text, name it. That would be really like kind of your main platform to do all your project. And there's two kind of a thing to understand. They have this concept of hub and project. So the hub is really kind of like the top level resource that you would create on Azure. So, and I will show you would say like an Azure region, and you create an hub. And inside a hub, as you can see here at the bottom, you have this thing called connected resource. Basically, from there, you can connect Azure AI Search, an instance of Azure OpenAI, some storage, name it, a bunch of AI services. And once they're connected through the hub, you will create some project. So let's say you have like multiple teams that work in your company. You will have one central hub, and inside that hub, you will have like a couple of projects, and those connected resource, for example, Azure OpenAI, they will be shared between projects. Or you can create, for example, like an instance of Azure AI Search and associate only to one specific project. For example, like, they have an index there with their own data. You don't want necessarily team or project A to see those data because it's a different team. So you can even do like kind of a granular security when you connect those resources. And when you create the hub, it comes behind the scene with a storage account. From there, obviously, you can upload some data set. Again, same concept. If you upload the data set at the hub level, that means every project will be able to see it. But when you create a project, basically, you will have a container that will be associated to you. And after that, you will be inside the project, be able to upload your data set that you will use maybe to do some RAG, indexing, an AI search, and so on. And like I said, there's no problem. There's no problem like of security because inside the project, basically, you have like an airbag. So if you're a user, you need to have like the proper permission at the container level. Plus, we apply airbag security. So you just see your container that was created inside the storage for your project. And this basically AI Foundry is based on top of Azure machine learning. So if you use to do infrastructure as code as Bicep or Terraform, you will see the resource you're going to create behind the scene. It's a machine learning, but you have like this property that we see in the slide that is called kind. So when you create a hub, you create a machine learning resource if you want, but you specify the kind to be hub. And if you create a project, kind of same concept, you use like again a machine learning, but the kind is project and you associate it to a hub. So this is just like kind of a high level architecture, what it look like. So you create your hub and behind the scene, you will have a managed virtual network. So you don't bring your own VNet here, like you just create the hub and when you will create some compute instance, they will be created inside a managed virtual network for you. So all the security and so on. So you don't have like all the work to securize this virtual network that AI Foundry need. It's done behind the scene for you. And most of the time, you will need to connect some resource to it. Like you have two resources that are kind of mandatory when you create a hub, an Azure storage and a key vault. And you will probably not have them access to a public endpoint. Most of customers, they just want to have all private endpoints. So when you create the AI Foundry hub, in his managed VNet, he will create the private endpoint to connect to your resource. So again, you won't need even to create those private endpoint here. It's done. The Azure do it for you. And after that, he will connect privately to the storage that you need, the key vault. Same concept. If you bring an instance of Azure OpenAI and you want to be accessible only through private endpoint, the managed virtual network, the private endpoint will be created for you. And here, if you can see at the bottom left, basically will be your own virtual network. So for example, if you want to access the storage account outside the project or the hub, then you will just create a private endpoint in your own virtual network. Same for the Vault and OpenAI, You don't need to, you can decide like, hey, I want my developer to, or my data scientist to just access the instance of Azure OpenAI or storage account or like inside AI Foundry. So at this moment, you won't just create those private endpoint. They will enter AI Foundry and they will have access to the storage through it. Oh, and yeah, little thing too. At the same time, you have multiple options, and I will show it when I will show through the portal. Like, oh, you can connect to the hub. Obviously, you can connect through a public endpoint, but most of the time, our customer they will want to connect through a private endpoint. So this is what it's done here. So this is the only thing you will need to do when you create like an Azure AI Foundry. If you want to privatize everything, you will just need to create like the private endpoint, obviously, and your own virtual network because you want to connect to the hub privately. And this slide is just to show like if you need to connect on like your on-premise network, it's possible. You will just need to install an application gateway somewhere, probably in a hub network connectivity. And from there, you will just do it through configuration. Basically, the hub through a private endpoint will connect to the application gateway. And at the bottom, you will expose what you need to consume. For example, if you have some APIs on-prem and you have some customer, they have some private API to consume some legacy system. So if you need to get those data to do some RAG or pass those data to the LLM, then that's the way to do it. You will have like AI Foundry to connect to application gateway, and you will expose basically like the backend pool, like your private APIs, and you'll be able to consume that through Azure AI Foundry. And I won't go too much in details through that, like it's explained really good in the documentation. And just before continuing the presentation, I want to show in the Azure portal what it looks like when you create an Azure AI Foundry. So you just like basically search Azure AI Foundry here and you create a new one. So the first thing, no surprise, like you need to create a resource group and a region. Just like a little thing you need to consider when you create the hub, basically the region, you know, let's say I'm creating here in Canada Central or Canada East. Depending where I create my hub, some model won't be available. You know, some will be maybe available only in West US. So that's something to take into consideration. For example, I know in Canada East, obviously we have OpenAI, but we don't have like the model from Meta available. So if I want to consume the model from Meta, then I will need to create a hub in probably a US region, let's say West US, and now we'll be able, you know, to work with those models. So just like to retain here, like the region of the hub, it's kind of like a link to where the model are available. But let's say you want to kind of centralize everything in a region. For example, here at Canada Central, I could create a hub in Canada Central. And after that, another one, let's say in West US, deploy like a model, let's say Lambda in West US. And after that, just configure this model to be consumed in Canada Central. It's pretty straightforward. So, but at the end of the day, we still need to like again the hub and the model, the region where they are is kind of related. Next, you just give a name, whatever. You need, if you go to the Azure portal, you have no choice to kind of create I think, a default project. So just thing to consider, if you use infrastructure as code, this won't be needed, but when you go to the Azure portal, you need to at least have one project. And the same, you need to at least have one instance of OpenAI services. If you, this is just go to the portal. If you do it through Azure CLI, Terraform, Bicep, you won't need to do that. You have a storage that is mandatory when you create like a hub, because like all the data set that you need to upload. And there's two things here, like an Azure Key Vault that would be mandatory, because behind the scene, if you connect using SAS key, you know, and not manage an entity in our back, then the connection string, if you want, will be saved inside a key vault. And all other connected service that you will attach, if you attach like AI search, you attach an instance of OpenAI, and you say, I'm using the connection string or the API key to connect to those services, they would be saved inside that key vault. And so basically, you will see a key vault in your resource group. And there's this new feature that is in preview, but it's like a key vault that will be managed by Microsoft, so you won't see it basically in your resource group. Kind of the same concept than the manage VPN. And after that, you have two resources that are like optional, application and site. I think like you would probably want to do that, since having some telemetry of your application is always good. And container registry, it's if you're using prompt flow, and when you build your prompt flow, you need a custom Docker image to do it, then container registry will be needed. And this is the part that is interesting. When you create an AI hub, you have kind of three networking options. So public, well, I think is pretty straightforward. That means you will be able to access the hub like through a public endpoint. All your compute VM can connect like to any public resource, and all the outbound, basically all the outbound to internet. For example, if you install some Python package and you run that on a compute instance, they will have fully unrestricted access to internet. And after that, you have like this other mod that is like, now the hub, you need to access it through a private endpoint. Your compute now can access private resource, meaning like if say you connect to AI search and it's fully private, or OpenAI is fully private, they will be able to connect to this private resource. And but all the outbound is still unrestricted, so they just like have like full access to the internet. And probably the most like you will want to use is like fully private. So basically, compute doesn't have full access to the internet. So when you go with that mode, behind the scene, like to control the flow, like what is allowed, like which FQDN you can go or which IP address, and Azure firewalls services will be deployed. But the Azure firewall services will only be deployed when you create your first compute instance. Meaning, if like I need to be fully private in my deployment Azure AI Foundry, but I don't need compute today because we don't use prompt flow, we don't do fine tuning of a model. I just want to write some Python code and consume those models. Then you won't be charged the firewall. The firewall will be create the minute you spin your first compute instance. And after that, you select the SKU of the firewall. As today, we don't have an option to bring your own firewall. I have some customer that ask me that. No, it's not possible today. So just keep that into consideration. So if your strategy will say, I will create one hub for all my team, and I have 20 team in the company, and all those team will use some compute, and then you will have like 20 firewall that will be created. So maybe it's better than to centralize, like have one hub and the team share that hub. So just about cost here. Well, encryption, it is what it is. Like we have that in all the Azure services. If you want to bring your own encryption key, identity, well, behind the scene, obviously the AI hub have a managed identity created, and this will be used if you want to connect, like not using the API key to connect to the resource that you bring. Let's say you want to connect to an OpenAI services instance, AI search, you can use the managed identity. And here, when you, like I said, the storage account is mandatory when you create an AI hub. So here is just to tell, like, you want to use the credential, like the kind of SaaS key, or you want to use like a fully RBAC. And after that, it just tell you if you go with the RBAC, you will need to provide like those two roles to the storage associated to the managed identity of the hub. And that's it. So basically, what I show, like if you select the third option in the networking, you will probably have like an architecture that will look like that, like fully private and so on. So this is just some guideline. Like I have this question that is coming from some customer. How many hub I need? Like do I put one hub for every team, or I do a centralized one? I have multiple environment. So obviously, I think like every customer, every company will have a different strategy. So like end of the guideline here is like probably you will have like a hub, at least a minimum hub between your environment. Obviously, prod will always kind of be alone. That's like kind of normal flow, and you probably have one for dev and test, or multiple in dev and test. So you will probably try to have one hub that you will share between the team, but you could have a team like that they do like 50 project of AI, they have a lot of sensitive data and so on. So maybe that team will have their own hub. That really depending of your strategy, but you would try to obviously share because about cost. If you create compute to run some fine tuning, to run some prompt flow, having a share hub and people can share those compute. And when I show the firewall that will be created, if like the compute access some, I don't know, specific Python package or some API on-prem, that means a firewall will be created. Again, for cost, you try to centralize as much as you can. I won't go through all the airbag. We'll share anyway the PowerPoint and is inside your documentation. Just to show here, you have like some specific airbag role at the hub level, and you have like more specific at the project level. So let's say probably at the project level, most of people will be an AI developer, but so just to show that you can have your granularity that you need for your security. And if one role, let's say you think Azure AI developer gives too much permission, you can always create custom role. But yeah, just to show that. And one big, and I will show it after in the demo, one big advantage of AI Foundry is what we call the model catalog. So I think like we have like something like 1,800 model today in that catalog, and obviously every month more are coming. So you have the most popular that are well known, like the one Facebook, Hugging Face, OpenAI, Mistral, and so on. And obviously other model that maybe a little bit less popular. But just to say, you have this catalog, so you can browse it, and after that test the model that thing fit your needs, you know. And you can connect. Obviously, the goal to have AI Foundry, like I said at the beginning, is to have a centralized platform to do all the AI development or project you want to do. So you can connect AI services, and every couple of months, new services are coming. So obviously, one of the most popular would be Azure Open AI Services, Azure AI Search, and so on. So you will be go through that portal. You will be able to create like a service connection. So at the hub, you just connect to those services, and when people will work and do project, they will just be able to connect easily to those services. And when I will do the demo, that will make more sense. What is the power of like a project and how you can connect to those resources easily leveraging the SDK. Well, this I already thought about it. So again, you have the model catalog, and the goal after that is, let's say I want to try like, I don't know, Hugging Face, for example. They have this concept of model as a services. So if we go maybe in the past and you found a model that you wanted to try, you needed to install maybe Kubernetes or a couple of virtual machine and deploy the model on those compute instance. Now with model as a services, you say, hey, please like install this model for me, and I want to consume it. So what this will do is like, let's say you are in East US, but we have a pool of virtual machine that run those model, and you say, hey, I want to try a Hugging Face. Then in your subscription behind the scene, the managed VNet, you will have like an API that will be deployed. And after that, you connect to this API, and it will connect for you like to the model that you want to consume. So you don't need to spin any compute, and you will pay as you go. So that's the model, pay as you go if you want for those model. So for the number of token you consume, depending the model you're using, you will have a cost related to that. One big advantage too with Azure AI Foundry, it comes with the SDK. So the SDK will really simplify your work, and they have like what they call an inference endpoint. See that as a proxy. So you could, it's not mandatory, but you could leverage this inference endpoint, and I think the next slide here show it. So it's like a proxy, like I said, and you just pass the model that you want to use. So you see, you have like always the same kind of endpoint, like .services.ai azure.com/model, and the name of your hub. So you would call this inference endpoint, pass your payload, like your message, and the model that you want to consume. And behind the scene, it will just like redirect to the proper model. Obviously, you will need to have deployed this model before a new project like GPT-4o or Mistral Large. But after that one is deployed, you don't need to know like, what is the endpoint of the API that it deploy in my tenant to connect to those model. No, you can just use the inference endpoint, so it will never change, and you can switch easily between model. So let's say you have a really complex scenario, and for each reason, Mistral Large for when you start kind of your flow makes sense. So you pass some data to Mistral, it return you the answer, and with this answer after that, GPT-4o make more sense for the next step. So you don't need to kind of like create two different clients, know all those different endpoints. No, you just call the inference endpoint and say, okay, call Mistral. After that, you call that with the same client, and now you say call GPT-4o. So the inference endpoint would kind of call the proper API that you have deployed, and after that call kind of the model to retrieve information. And it would help you in your development flow too, because if you call 5 different model in your project, you have 5 different endpoint per se, like in dev. When you graduate your code to QA, you need to modify again those 5 different endpoint. Now you have like kind of a single endpoint you just need to it. If you use Azure API management to in your work, kind of the same concept, Azure API management, and it's like one centralized endpoint to all your API. So here, let's see that as one centralized endpoint to consume any kind of model, basically. And just I mentioned like Azure API management. If you start like you're working with OpenAI, we have this concept of Gen AI gateway at Microsoft. A lot of our customers, they want to protect like their instance of Azure OpenAI behind an Azure API management. For have some policies about token consumption, throttling, and so on. Same thing can be done with the Azure AI Foundry. Like you see here, you will just retrieve an OpenAI client. And after that, once you retrieve it through SDK, you call Azure API Management to call Azure OpenAI. And I will show it to you how it's done. So now, like I talk a lot, so I will show a little bit a demo. So before going through code, I will show you what it looks like the AI Foundry. So if you're like the hub administrator, you will have like kind of this general overview of the hub here. So you will see all the project that you have in your hub. You can add new user, like the user need to be in your Microsoft Entra ID. You give them specific role and so on. You can see all the compute you created. So when you create a compute at this level, obviously all project can share it. So here I created a compute, so I can like run prompt flow, etc. So the three goal on the compute instance. If you use prompt flow, you need a compute instance. If you do fine tuning, you will need compute. And the third case, if you deploy a model and you don't want to use the serverless approach, but you should, but if for X reason, maybe it's not available or you need to do some specific customization, you can deploy a model in a compute instance. And to create a compute, pretty straightforward. You select the kind of compute you need, GPU, CPU, and after that, if I click next, you can say, oh, if like you have 60 minutes of inactivity shut down, again, all about cost, so you can do that. After that, you can deactivate any root access. So if someone do a SSH, let's say you enable SSH on this virtual machine, at least you can deactivate the root access. So someone cannot do like some operation that you don't want it to be done. Next, like I said, the one advantage is to connect resource that you'll be able to consume a new project. Now I have a couple already. So again, pretty straightforward. You click new connection here and we have a list. Some are in preview. And again, I think like we have more services coming all the time. If you have an API somewhere that you need to consume and you want to consume it easily through a project, again, you can do that here. And like I said, you can, when you create a connection, you can share it to all project or a specific project. Let's say you have a OpenAI, you create an instance of an OpenAI, and this instance of OpenAI are like a PTU, those kind of reserve instance, but you can just like create a connection at the hub level, but you associate only to one specific project because this PTU, like you purchase it for only this specific project and you don't want to be shared between different projects. And same thing here, you can deploy some model at the hub level or at project level. And now we'll enter a project to show you what it will look like. So here I'm like at the project level. I can here update, put some data. So it's what I did here. I uploaded like a JSON. So you just like go and select the data you want to upload. And behind the scene, this will be uploaded in a container in the storage. Like I showed at the beginning, when you create the hub, you need absolutely to have a storage. And when you create a project, we'll create a container with RBAC plus ABAC permission. So when I upload data, it will go in that container that was created. So here it's kind of good because, I can easily, depending on the format that it is, see what is the data set look like. After that, you can create an index. That's what I did. So I created an index in AI search. And if I click here, I won't, but it will just bring you to the index you create. But it was pretty straightforward. I just said, hey, I want an index. This is my data set you create. I want a vector. Click, 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 and all the indexation was done for me, So I didn't need to write any line of code. Same thing here. You see, I can deploy model at project level. So here at this project, I deploy like DeepSeek and Pi4, and I can retrieve the endpoint. So if I want, like I said, when you deploy a serverless model, basically you have two options: compute or serverless API. So when you do serverless API, it will create kind of an API, and you manage VNet that you can just ping to consume the model. So basically, this is the endpoint of the API. After that, like if you have a playground here, like when you're at the project level, so you can test different kind of AI services. You can like do the test the chat playground, and when it's good, you can switch between the model here easily. So you can start testing with GPT-4. After that, you can say, oh, I'm going to test with this one, and so on. And obviously, depending of the model that you use here, well, some we have like a less parameter, or that will change behind the scene. You have the model catalog. That's one of the features probably you will use the most. You can filter the model. And one interesting feature is this benchmark, Sometimes you would like to compare like one model versus another one. So you can go here and you have like a benchmark. And you now out of the box, when I click, I wanted to compare this model, it would just kind of get the most popular, but I could like select other model, and here you have a bunch of graphs that show you the performance. So kind of interesting feature when you want to know which model will have the better performance for what I'm trying to do. That's a way to do it. And to deploy a model, if I go back here, I'll just show it to you, like I said. So I will select model here, whatever this
Hugo,
one.
just
Yeah.
a time check, man. We are a bit over time, so just want to give you a
Okay.
heads up.
Yeah, thank you. So you have two mode here. Basically, you have serverless and manage compute. And since we're over time, we'll just show one demo. So here again, I'll go quick. Just want to show you what's the power of a project. So here I configure a logger, and you see here I have this project client. The only thing I need to do is like, hey, what is the connection string of my project? And by doing this, I will have access like, hey, I can get the connection string of application inside. So I don't need to know the connection string of application inside. If I need specific client, let's say I need a chat completion client, an embedding client, same thing, I just call the inference endpoint that I was talking to, and I just get the client. And the same thing here, you see I wanted to have an AI search, so I don't, like I say, retrieve me the connection string for my AI search that is configured inside my project, and I can create the client. And I will just do a quick demo here. So out of the box, like, I can just create my client just knowing the connection string of my project. So that's the power of like basically the SDK or AI Foundry. With the project, you just pass a connection string and you're able to create all the client. And here, I'm already able to interrogate my LM. So just to finish, like this was like really a high level overview. AI Foundry, it's a big product, but I just wanted to show you a little bit what you can do with it. So I don't know if anybody has some question.
No, thanks, Hugo. That's very useful. Any questions, folks? I think this is very relevant information with AI being and taking over everything. So please feel free to ask if there are any questions. Okay. Once again, thanks for staying a bit over, and thanks, Hugo, for presenting. I really appreciate it, man.
Problem.
To see you again in a future session. Thanks. Thank you, guys, and hope everybody has a great weekend and great rest of your day. Bye bye.